The rain came down like a vengeance that night, thick, relentless, turning the half-renovated Seo Grand Hotel into a gilded cage. Immani stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse suite, watching the Seoul skyline blur into streaks of neon and shadow. The storm had knocked out the power, leaving only the emergency lights to cast long, trembling fingers across the marble floors. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not alone with Jung. Miho had left hours ago, called away by an investor's crisis, his parting words a cool, possessive murmur. "Don't touch anything. I'll be back." As if she were a child who might break his precious hotel. As if she hadn't spent years designing spaces more breathtaking than this. But it wasn't Miho's voice she heard now. "You're shivering." Jung's voice was warm, amused, the way it had been when he was a teenager and trailing after her like a lovesick puppy during her first visit to Korea. Back then she'd laughed it off, ruffled his hair, called him Ibu, little brother. But the boy who'd once blushed at her smile was gone. The man standing behind her now was all lean muscle and quiet confidence, his camera always slung over one shoulder, his dark eyes missing nothing. "I'm fine," she lied, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. A beat of silence. Then his jacket settled over her shoulders, heavy with the scent of leather and something uniquely him. Wild, like the ocean air of Jeju Island where he'd taken her once, years ago, when Miho had been too busy with the family empire to notice. "Liar," he murmured, his breath hot against the shell of her ear. "You've always been terrible at lying, Immani Ssi." Her name in his mouth was a sin. Caress. Promise. She should have stepped away. Should have reminded him of the rules. She was here to work. Miho was his brother. She and Miho had history, complicated, messy, unfinished history. But the storm raged on, and the hotel felt like a living thing, its walls pulsing with the memory of what had almost been. Of the nights she and Miho had stolen in New York, his hands mapping her skin like she was a blueprint he was memorizing. Of the way he'd looked at her when he said, "Stay," and the way she'd left anyway, because love wasn't enough when continents stood between them. Jung's fingers brushed her wrist as he adjusted the sleeves of his jacket. "You're thinking about him." It wasn't a question. Immani exhaled sharply. "Don't." "Why not?" His thumb traced the inside of her palm, slow, deliberate. "Do you still love him?" The question hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds outside. She had loved Miho. Or at least she'd loved the idea of him. The driven, brilliant man who saw the world in sharp lines and colder calculations. But love with Miho had always felt like standing in a museum. Beautiful but untouchable. A thing to be admired, not lived in. Jung was different. Jung was fire. And that was the problem. Because fire didn't ask permission before it burned. It didn't care about the rules, the bloodlines, the unspoken vows carved into the bones of families like the Seos, where loyalty was currency and betrayal was a debt paid in shame. Fire only knew hunger. And right now, standing in the storm's howling darkness with his jacket draped over her like a claim, Jung was starving. Immani's breath hitched as his thumb traced the lifeline of her palm, slow, deliberate. She could feel the heat of him at her back, the way his chest rose and fell in time with hers, as if their bodies had already decided what their minds refused to name. "Do you still love him?" The question coiled around her ribs, squeezing. She had loved Miho. Or at least, she'd loved the man she thought he could be. The one who'd whispered promises in New York lofts, who'd made her believe, for a fleeting moment, that she could belong in his world. But Miho's love had always been a gilded cage. Beautiful. Suffocating. A place where she was admired but never truly seen. Jung saw her. And that was worse. Because Jung didn't just see the architect, the professional, the woman who could design a skyline. He saw the way her hands trembled when she was tired. The way she bit her lip when she was lying. The way her eyes darkened when she was wanting. "You don't get to ask me that," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The storm rattled the windows, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Jung chuckled, low and rough. "I get to ask you anything, Immani Ssi. You're wearing my jacket." His free hand slid up her arm, fingers splaying over the bare skin of her shoulder, where Miho's designer dress had slipped down. "And you haven't taken it off." She should have. Should have shoved it back at him, should have put distance between them, should have remembered that this right here, was the exact kind of reckless, selfish choice that had left her heart in tatters the last time she'd let ire override sense. But the storm had other plans. A crack of thunder shook the building, and the emergency lights flickered, plunging them into near darkness. Jisung's grip tightened, pulling her back against him. "Careful," he murmured. But there was nothing careful about the way his body pressed into hers, about the way his breath fanned the nape of her neck. "Wouldn't want you to fall." Immani's pulse roared in her ears. She was falling. Had been falling since the moment she'd walked into this damn hotel and seen him again. All grown up, all man, with a gaze that stripped her bare. "Jisung," she warned, but it sounded like a plea. "Tell me to stop," he challenged, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me you don't remember the way you used to laugh when I'd follow you around like a fool. Tell me you don't wonder what would have happened if you'd looked at me back then the way you're looking at me now." Her lungs burned, because she did remember. Remembered the way his teenage eyes had tracked her every move, the way he'd blush when she teased him, the way he'd once drunkenly at a family dinner slurred, "Immani SSI, when I grow up, I'm gonna marry you." Miho had laughed it off. She had laughed it off. But she hadn't forgotten. And neither had he. His hand slid up to cup her jaw, tilting her face toward his. The darkness between them was thick, charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "I've spent years watching you love my brother," he confessed, voice raw. "Years pretending it didn't kill me a little every time. And now you're here. Finally here. And you're mine to lose all over again." The word mine sent a shiver down her spine. It was possessive. Wrong. And yet, God, she wanted it to be true. Miho's cologne hit her before she saw him. Cold. Sharp. Him. Immani jerked away from Jisung like she'd been burned, stumbling back until her spine hit the wall. The emergency lights flickered back to life, casting long shadows across the penthouse, and there, silhouetted in the doorway, stood Miho. His tailored suit was rumpled from the rain, his hair slicked back, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were black with something she'd never seen in them before. Jealousy. "Brother," Jisung said, voice steady, but his fingers flexed at his sides, as if he were physically restraining himself from reaching for her again. "You're back." Miho didn't answer. His gaze locked onto Immani, then flicked to the jacket still draped over her shoulders, Jisung's jacket, and his jaw tightened. "I see you've made yourself at home." The words were light. The tone was lethal. Immani's stomach twisted. She should have taken the jacket off. Should have run. But the damage was done. Miho had seen. And Miho knew. "Miho, it's not," she started, but the words died in her throat. What could she say? "It's not what it looks like." But it was. It was exactly what it looked like. Miho stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. "You're trembling." His voice was ice. Cold. Jisung tensed. She was shivering. "The power's out." Miho's smile was razor-thin. "How considerate of you." His gaze flicked to Immani, and for the first time in years, she saw something raw in his eyes. Not the cool calculation of a man who always had the upper hand, but fear. "Immani, my jacket is in the car. Let me." He reached for her, but Jisung moved first, stepping between them. "She's fine," Jisung said, voice low, dangerous. Miho's eyes flashed. "She's mine." The word hung in the air, a challenge, a claim. And Immani broke. Because she wasn't anyone's. Not Miho's. Not Jisung's. She was a woman standing in the wreckage of her own choices, torn between the past she couldn't escape, and the future she wasn't brave enough to take. "Stop," she snapped, shoving Jisung's jacket off her shoulders. It pulled at her feet like a discarded sin. "Just stop. Both of you." She dragged a hand through her hair, her chest heaving. "Miho, we can't." She couldn't even finish the sentence. Because what were they? Ex-lovers? Business partners? A mistake waiting to happen again? Miho's expression darkened. "You're right. We can't. Not when you're looking at him like that." Immani flinched. "Like what?" "Like he's the air and you're drowning." Miho's voice was quiet. Deadly. "Like you'd choose him over me in a heartbeat if you let yourself." Jisung's breath hitched. She could feel his shock, his hope, his pain. Because Miho had just given voice to the truth none of them had dared to say. And the worst part? Miho was right. She would choose Jisung. In another life. In a world where brothers didn't share blood and history didn't have claws. She'd choose the man who made her feel alive, not the one who made her feel adequate. But this wasn't another life. This was real. And in the real world some lines couldn't be crossed. Silence. Thick, suffocating, like the humidity before the rain had fallen. Then, Miho laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. All these years, Jisung. And you still can't keep your hands off what's mine. Jisung's control snapped. She was never yours, he snarled, stepping forward, fists clenched. Not when she was in New York. Not now. You had your chance, Hyung. You let her go. Miho's face went pale. I begged her to stay. And she left, Jisung shot back. Because you asked her to shrink to fit into your world. And she's too damn bright for that. Immani's breath caught. Because no one had ever defended her like that. Not even herself. Miho's gaze flicked to her, betrayal and fury warring in his eyes. Is that what you think? That I wanted to dim you? He took a step toward her, voice dropping to a growl. I wanted to keep you. There's a difference. Jisung scoffed. Funny way of showing it. Miho ignored him, his focus locked on Immani. Tell me, he demanded, voice raw. Tell me you don't feel anything for me. Tell me this, he gestured between them. Is nothing. And I'll walk away. For good. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Because she did feel something for Miho. Nostalgia. Regret. The ghost of what could have been if they'd been different people. But love? No. Not anymore. And the love she did feel, the wild, reckless, terrifying kind, wasn't for him. Jisung must have seen the answer in her eyes before she could speak. His breath left him in a rush, his shoulders squaring like a man bracing for a blow. Miho, he said, voice quiet. Don't do this. Miho's laugh was hollow. Too late. He turned back to Immani, his expressio. And carefully blank. Well, architect, are you going to answer me? Or are you just going to stand there and let my brother ruin us both? The words hung between them, a blade poised to fall. And Immani spoke. I can't give you what you want, she said, her voice steady, even as her hands shook. Not because I don't care about you, Miho, but because She stopped, swallowed. Because I love him. The truth settled over her like a shroud. Heavy. Inevitable. Jisung's eyes burned into hers, his chest rising and falling like he'd run a marathon. Miho's face went slack as if she'd slapped him. And then the lights came back on. Harsh, unforgiving, illuminating every raw, exposed nerve in the room. Miho's gaze flicked between them, his expression shuddering. I see, he said, voice deadly calm. Then to Jisung. You always did have terrible taste. Jisung flinched. But before he could retort, Miho turned on his heel and walked out, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Silence. Then, Immani moved. She didn't think. Didn't breathe. She just closed the distance between her and Jisung in 3 strides, grabbed the front of his shirt, and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was desperation. A drowning woman clinging to the only thing keeping her afloat. Jisung groaned against her lips, his hands flying to her waist, pulling her flesh against him. His mouth was hot, demanding, hungry, like he'd been starving for this for years. And God, she knew that hunger. Felt it in the way his teeth nipped at her lower lip, in the way his fingers tangled in her hair, in the way he moved like a man who'd memorized the shape of her in his dreams. Fuck Immani, he gasped, breaking the kiss only to press his forehead to hers. Do you have any idea how long I've? The door slammed open. Miho stood there, his face a mask of cold, lethal rage. His eyes were black. His hands were fists. And in that moment Immani knew. She just started a war. And there would be no winners. Miho didn't yell. Didn't storm. Didn't move. He just looked at them, at Jisung's swollen lips, at Immani's disheveled hair, at the way their chests heaved in sync, and said, voice eerily calm, Get out. Jisung tensed. Miho. Out. Miho's voice cracked like a whip. Both of you. Now. Immani's stomach twisted. Miho, please. Now. His gaze flicked to her, and for the first time she saw hurt there. Raw. Unfiltered. Or I swear to God, Immani, I will make sure you never work in this city again. Jisung's body went rigid. You wouldn't. Miho's smile was a knife. Try me. The air left Immani's lungs. Because she knew he would. Miho Seo didn't make idle threats. And if he cut her off, her career, her livelihood would be over. Jisung must have seen the panic in her eyes. His grip on her hand tightened. We're not leaving you two. I said out. Miho's voice was a growl. This is my hotel. My family. My fucking decision. Jisung's jaw clenched, but after a long tense moment he nodded. Fine. But this isn't over. Miho's laugh was bitter. Oh, it's over. The elevator ride down was the longest of Immani's life. Jisung didn't speak. Didn't look at her. Just stared at the flickering floor numbers like they held the answers to a question neither of them could ask. What now? The storm had passed. The city was quiet. But the damage was done. As they stepped into the lobby, Immani's phone buzzed. A text from Miho. One word. Leave. Her hands shook. Jisung saw the message over her shoulder. His expression darkened. He can't do this. Yes, he can, she whispered. And he will. Jisung turned to her, his dark eyes burning. So what? You're just going to run again? Like you did from him? Like you did from me. The words hit like a punch. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. He grabbed her hands, his voice rough. You want me? Fight for me. Stay. Let him be angry. Let him hate us. I don't care. I've spent my whole life in his shadow, Immani. I'm done hiding. Her throat teened. As God she wanted to scream yes, to throw caution to the wind, to choose him, consequences be damned. But the fear was a living thing, coiling around her heart. What if she stayed and lost everything? What if she left and lost him? Jisung must have seen the war in her eyes. His grip loosened. His voice softened. Or are you just going to let him win? The question hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds that had brought them here. And Immani chose. Jisung's words hung in the air, sharp as shattered glass. Or are you just going to let him win? Immani's breath came in ragged gasps. The lobby's chandeliers blazed overhead, casting Jisung's face in golden shadow. His dark eyes wild, his jaw set, his fingers still tangled with hers. Outside, the storm had passed, but the air between them crackled with a tension more dangerous than lightning. She could feel Miho's presence like a brand on her skin, even though he was gone. His threat echoed in her skull. Leave, or I will make sure you never work in this city again. Her career, her reputation, the life she'd rebuilt after her divorce, piece by painful piece. But then there was Jisung, the man who'd loved her silently for years. The man who made her feel alive in a way Miho never had. The man whose touch set her on fire. And in that moment, standing in the gilded lobby of the Seo Grand Hotel, Immani realized something with bone-deep certainty. She was tired of running, tired of playing by the rules, tired of letting fear dictate her choices, tired of pretending she didn't want him, with every fiber of her being. So she lifted her chin, met Jisung's gaze, and said the words that would change everything. No, I'm not letting him win. Jisung's breath hitched. For a heartbeat, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then his face split into a grin so bright it stole her breath. Then don't. His hand slid up to cradle her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks like she was something precious. Stay. Fight. Choose me. And she did. She surged up onto her toes and kissed him hard, desperate, like she was sealing a vow. Jisung groaned into her mouth, his arms banding around her, pulling her so close she could feel the frantic beat of his heart against hers. For that moment there was no Miho. No threats. No past. Just them. And it was glorious. The wrath of a Seo. The fantasy lasted exactly 7 seconds. Then the lobby doors slammed open. Miho stood there, flanked by 2 security guards, his expression a mask of icy fury. His suit was still damp from the rain, his hair slicked back, but his eyes were black with a rage she'd never seen in him before. You were warned, he said, voice low, lethal. Immani's blood turned to ice. Jisung didn't flinch. He stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. Miho, don't. Don't what? Miho's laugh was a blade. Don't ruin you? Don't destroy her? Don't burn this to the ground. He took a step forward, and the security guards moved with him. It's already done. Immani's stomach dropped. What does that mean? Miho's gaze flicked to her, cold and final. It means your contract with Seo Enterprises is terminated. Effective immediately. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. On it was an email, her email, with the subject line. Urgent, termination of services, Immani Carter. Her knees nearly buckled. No. This wasn't just a threat. This was real. Miho had already sent it. Already ruined her. Jisung's hands clenched into fists. You son of a. And if you think I'm stopping there, Miho cut in, voice like steel. You're mistaken. He turned to the security guards. Escort them out. If they resist, remove them. The guards moved forward. Immani's heart pounded. This was it. The moment where the world she built came crashing down. But then, Jisung laughed. A wild, reckless sound that made Miho's eyes narrow. You think this changes anything? Jisung taunted, stepping closer to his brother. You think firing her erases what just happened? She's mine now, Miho. And no amount of money or power is gonna change that. Miho's face twisted. She's nothing to you. She's everything, Jisung shot back. The words hit Immani like a physical blow. Everything. No one had ever. Miho's control snapped. In one swift motion he lunged forward and slammed Jisung against the nearest pillar. You ungrateful little shit, he hissed. After everything I've done for you, after years of cleaning up your messes, covering for your mistakes, this is how you repay me? By stealing from me. Jisung didn't back down. He grinned, blood trickling from his split lip. I didn't steal shit. She chose me. Miho's grip tightened. She doesn't get to choose. Not when it comes to us. Then why are you so scared? Jisung challenged. For a heartbeat, Miho just stared at him. Then with a snarl, he shoved Jisung away and turned to the guards. Get them out of my sight. The ride down to the street was a blur. Immani's mind raced, her hands shaking as she clutched her phone. She needed to call her lawyer. Needed to fix this. But the email was already sent. The damage was already done. By the time they hit the sidewalk, the reality of what had just happened crashed over her like a wave. She was unemployed. Her reputation ruined. And Miho would make sure she never worked in Seoul again. Jisung must have seen the panic on her face. He grabbed her hands, his voice rough. Immani, look at me. She couldn't breathe. Hey. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't even realized had fallen. We'll fix this. How? Her voice broke. He's Miho Seo. He owns half this city. He can destroy me. Jisung's expression darkened. Then we leave. She blinked. What? We get the hell out of Seoul. Tonight. His grip tightened. Go to Jeju. Or Busan. Or fucking Paris. Somewhere he can't touch us. Immani's chest ached. And what? Live in hiding? Pretend this never happened? No. Jisung's voice was fierce. We stop pretending. We stop hiding. We be together out in the open, and let the whole damn world see. The words were intoxicating. Tempting. But then her phone buzzed again. Another email. This one from her firm in New York. Subject. Urgent. Client concerns Seo Enterprises. Her stomach dropped. No. She clicked it. The message was short. Brutal. Immani, we've received concerning reports regarding your professional conduct with Seo Enterprises. Until this is resolved, we must suspend your position. Effective immediately. She staggered. Jisung caught her, his arms wrapping around her as her vision blurred. Immani. He didn't just fire me from the hotel, she whispered, voice breaking. He's blacklisting me. My firm. Jisung's face paled. That mother. It's over, she choked out. My career. My life. No. Jisung's voice was a growl. It's not over. Not if you don't. Let it be. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. Miho can take your job. He can take your money. But he can't take this. He gestured between them. He can't take us. Not unless you let him. Immani wanted to believe him. God, she did. But the fear was a living thing, coiling around her heart. What if I can't? She whispered. What if I'm not strong enough? Jisung's expression softened. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her skin. Then I'll be strong enough for both of us. And in that moment, standing on a rain-slicked Seoul street with the weight of the world pressing down on them, Immani realized something. She believed him. They didn't go back to her hotel. Didn't go back to his. Instead, Jisung flagged down a taxi and gave the driver an address in Incheon. Where are we going? Immani asked, her voice still shaky. Jisung's grin was wicked. Somewhere he'll never think to look. The taxi wove through the city, the neon lights blurring into streaks of color. Imani's phone buzzed constantly. Calls from her boss, from colleagues, from Miho himself. She ignored them all. She was done running from her life. Now she was running toward something. Toward him. When they finally stopped, it was at a small nondescript airport hangar. A private plane waited on the tarmac, its stairs already lowered. Imani's breath caught. Jisung, what is this? He took her hand, his grip sure. A friend of mine owes me a favor. He tugged her forward. We're getting out of here. Tonight. But my things. My passport. Already taken care of. He pulled a small duffel bag from the trunk of the taxi and slung it over his shoulder. I had a feeling you'd need a way out. She stared at him. You planned this. I hoped, he corrected. But I wasn't gonna let you go without a fight. The words settled over her, warm and heavy. He'd fought for her. And now she was going to fight with him. As they boarded the plane, Immani took one last look at Seoul. At the skyline she'd helped design. At the life she was leaving behind. And for the first time in years she didn't feel fear. She felt free. The plane took them to Jeju Island, a place of volcanic cliffs, black sand beaches, and 1,000,000 miles away from Miho's reach. They landed under the cover of darkness, the humid island air wrapping around them like a blanket. Jisung had a villa waiting, a small secluded place on the coast, where the only sounds were the crash of the waves and the rustle of the palm trees. No Miho. No threats. No past. Just them. And as they stepped inside, the tension between them, banked for so long, finally snapped. Jisung backed her against the wall. His hands framing her face, his mouth crashing down on hers. Immani moaned into the kiss, her fingers tangling in his hair as she pulled him closer. There was no hesitation. No guilt. No fear. Just need. Jisung's hand slid down to her waist, lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around him, her dress riding up her thighs as he carried her toward the bedroom. I've wanted this for years, he growled against her lips. Fucking years, Immani. Then take it, she gasped. And he did. Clothes came off in a frenzy, buttons popping, fabric tearing, skin meeting skin for the first time. Jisung's body was perfection. Lean muscle, golden skin, a trail of dark hair leading down from his navel. And when he finally slid inside her, Immani shattered. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was wild. Desperate. Years in the making. And when they collapsed onto the bed afterward, sweaty and breathless, Jisung pulled her close, his heart pounding against hers. No regrets, he murmured. Immani smiled against his chest. Not a single one. But the peace didn't last. Because 3 days later, as they lounged on the villa's terrace, watching the sunset paint the ocean in gold and pink, Jisung's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and went still. Who is it? Immani asked, her stomach twisting. Jisung's jaw tightened. Miho. Imani's breath caught. Jisung hesitated, then answered. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, you think this changes anything? Miho's voice was cold, clear through the speaker. You think running away makes you winners? Jisung's grip on the phone tightened. We're not running. We're living. Miho's laugh was a blade. You're delusional. She'll get bored, Jisung. They always do. And when she leaves you, and she will, you'll have nothing. No family. No name. No future. Jisung's eyes flicked to Immani, his expression unreadable. She's not going anywhere. No. Miho's voice was a taunt. Then why is she crying right now? Immani's eyes burned. Damn him. She wasn't crying. But the doubt. Leave her alone, Jisung snarled. Or what? Miho challenged. You'll come back? Beg for forgiveness? Grovel at my feet like the little brother you are. Jisung's control snapped. I'm done being your little brother. A pause. Then you're done being a Seo. The line went dead. Jisung lowered the phone, his hands shaking. Immani's heart pounded. What does that mean? Jisung's expression was grim. It means he's cutting me off. From the family. From the money. From everything. Immani's stomach dropped. Jisung. He met her gaze, his dark eyes burning. It means we're on our own. And in that moment Immani realized the truth. Miho hadn't just declared war on them. He declared war on himself. Because if he thought this would break them, he was wrong. That night they made love again, slow this time. Tender. Like they were memorizing each other. Afterward, as Jisung traced lazy circles on her bare back, Immani finally asked Ked the question that had been gnawing at her. What happens now? Jisung was quiet for a long moment. Then, now. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Now we survive. And Miho. Jisung's grip tightened. He'll come around. Immani lifted her head, searching his face. You really believe that? Jisung's smile was sad. No. But I hope it. She settled back against him, her heart heavy. Because she knew Miho. And Miho never forgave. And as the waves crashed against the shore outside, one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.